Search for Truth 2, Lesson 5, Chart 1. Joshua triumphantly led Israel to their new home in Canaan. While Israel was absolutely obedient to God's will and word, they were victorious. But their own strategy resulted in failure and defeat. Following Joshua's leadership, judges arose to defend the people from enemy attacks. But eventually the people became disinterested in being God's chosen ones. They wanted a king like other nations. Conquering the land of promise. The death of Moses. For 38 years, Israel wandered in the wilderness. Little is recorded of that period. They simply wandered until the unbelieving generation died and a new one could claim the land of promise. Moses was prohibited from entering the land of promise. When there had been no water, God instructed Moses to speak to the rock. Instead, reacting to the criticizing people, he struck the rock twice with his rod. Numbers 20:12 says, "Because ye believed me not to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore ye shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them." At the age of 120, Moses delivered his farewell address, re-emphasizing the importance of loving and obeying God. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 5 and 6, also chapter 10, verses 12 through 13, chapter 11, verse 1, and Deuteronomy 13, verse 3. "And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart." To love and obey God is still the most important principle we can learn. Moses was not seen again until centuries later when he stood with Elijah and Christ on the Mount of Transfiguration. See Matthew 17, verses 1 through 5. Joshua leads the way. Another leader stepped forward. Joshua was a man of power, courage, wisdom, and immediate action. He was one of two survivors of the original 12 spies sent to Canaan almost 40 years earlier. The biblical narrative continues in the book of Joshua. The first 5 books of law were written by Moses. The next section covers the history of the nation of Israel. Crossing the Jordan. The priests carried the ark representing the presence of God. When the priests' feet touched the brim of the water stopped at the city of Adam, about 15 miles north of the Dead Sea, leaving a wide, dry expanse for the Israelites to cross. In remembrance. Joshua ordered the erection of 2 memorials in a commemorative to the miracle of the Jordan crossing. A man from each tribe carried a stone from the riverbed to build one on the west bank, and a second memorial was constructed by Joshua in the Jordan riverbed itself. When the priests came out of the Jordan riverbed, the heap of water fell again and overflowed the banks. This meant that there was no turning back for Israel. The wilderness life was erased forever. Now, within the scope of their promised inheritance, their task was to drive out the enemy and possess the land. Conquering Canaan. Israel's new home was a place of freedom and rest. But now heathen inhabitants had already cultivated the land, built homes, cities, planted orchards and vineyards. All Israel had to do was conquer and become the benefactor. The book of Joshua records the history of a 7-year triumphant military campaign. When Joshua and his people were absolutely obedient to God's will and word, they were victorious. After the conquest, the land was divided among the 12 tribes. Realizing that the people were inclining toward idolatry, Joshua announced a solemn assembly at Shechem. Joshua's challenge remains relevant for today. Choose you this day whom you will serve. Then he determined for his family, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Today, each individual must make that decision. Others may persuade, but they cannot decide for you. Others can pray, but they cannot control your destiny. The choice is yours. exclusively.